Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, God, we just thank you for everyone being here tonight. God, we ask you to bless us, God, as we get ready to go through the city of zoning and zoning ordinances, oh God. God, we ask you to forgive us the clarity and understanding, oh God. Father, we ask you to guide Attorney Matt Tucker, God, as he gave it to us tonight, oh God, what needs to be done and done correctly, God. And we just thank you. We give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, this is the meeting of old business and business, we just give to, have Mr. Tucker to give us our brief and done. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Tucker.
I said I wasn't going to use the podium, but I think I'm going to have to. All right, well, we're going to start with some, what we shouldn't have done. How about that? First up in the issue. All right, I put all in front of all of you a map of the city. I want to make sure we get oriented so we know. Up here, this B is 77 and 431. I'm sure everybody's in the right place right here. I'm going to spend a good bit of time on introduction, basically talking about that area because it is so messed up. So I wanted to basically start there. The zoning ordinance works like this. There was a booklet. This is actually an ordinance. In the back of it is where it was adopted by the city of Lafayette. So this book was adopted.
70s.
Yeah, no, there was a previous version. This is in 2003. Notice it says 2001 on the front. We've had zoning in this city since the 50s, believe it or not. But this was the latest version of it. Every non-conforming use is grandfathered in. You cannot ex post facto change things. If there's a certain use being done on property at the time this ordinance was passed, that use may continue. The same thing with lot sizes and all the various regulations in there. Most of them do not apply to pre-existing property. My law office was a variance under the old ordinance. There's no variance for it in the new ordinance. So my law office is technically operating under a grandfather clause. That's the reason I'm allowed to have that office in a residential neighborhood. And that's actually a constitutional issue, ex post facto laws. You've only seen some ex post facto laws granted recently. They had to do with tax credits where they distributed money to people. Other than that, you're not going to see an ex post facto law because nobody wants an ex post facto law unless they give money. So we have to make sure that what we're doing here is always in the future. You're going to look at current and past uses to make a determination about what you would like to see happen in the future. But this is called a planning commission. And that planning commission is supposed to develop ideas and plan the direction of the city for the next 20, 30, 40 years. When we go through this map, and we'll start on it in just a minute, you're going to see that the folks who put this map together didn't foresee some rather rapid changes that are not reflected in this map and are causing us a lot of difficulty in enforcing the current zoning ordinance that we have. Councilman Hunter is here, and he has often pointed out the issues with the current zoning ordinance. It's only been in effect for 18 years, but a good chunk of it has not been followed. We didn't have enforcement officers for years, and when we did get an enforcement officer, it was hit or miss, and sometimes they confused the building enforcement, building code enforcement with the zoning enforcement. The two work together, but they're not the same. Some of the people we hired in the past couldn't tell the difference between the two, and I will let those people remain nameless. George might can think about who one of them I'm talking about. The other thing is our petitions for variances are extremely convoluted the way they're done. Mobile home variances are not, the formula that's in this book is not a good formula. I'm just going to go through the contents of this book real quick. Each of you needs to have one of these books. If you don't have one, you need one. You don't necessarily need it tonight, but sometime in the future, you're going to have to review some of this stuff so we can actually plan or direct the people that you want to assist you with the plan. This book would have been put together by East Alabama Regional, Planning Authority or something like that.
Planning Commission.
What they are is a nonprofit agency that assists governments. The key word being nonprofit. So the issue with them is if they didn't have any skin in the game, they're getting paid one way or the other. We didn't pay them, so we just got a reprint of something else they had. And if you go through the book, there seems to be a real emphasis on tire recapping facilities. Never had one in the city of Lafayette, but it's mentioned in this book about half a dozen times.
How do we go about getting a copy of that?
Lewis has some up there.
Yeah, I think we have it online, I don't.
There is a
We have it
scanned,
online.
yeah,
We have it
there's a
online.
scanned version,
Give me
and
an
it's,
email address. I can email it to all of you all. Because we don't have a hard copy, extra hard
We
copy.
used to have copies.
We got a hard copy, we don't have that many left.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna be hard to reprint it. But in any event, they acted as consultants to assist the city in this process, and they're the ones that upgraded our map lab. And they at times have had capable people there, and they've had times they haven't. So it's sort of a hit and miss with that organization. I have no idea who's there now. I dealt with them on the, it was a Clinton initiative, Enterprise Zone, the Enterprise Committee, whatever Enterprise Zone Committee. That was a program that was passed in '93 or '94 for rural areas. Certain monies were dedicated for grants to be able to educate people on computer uses and things like that. Well, that thing still exists because it still has some money. And that's been almost 20 years ago. It's almost as old as this ordinance. So a lot of things that happen in the government world just keep going unless they're shut down. Make sure that I don't have to. Let my wife know I'm in a meeting. All right. So anyway, at some point, this group, if they're getting an idea of what this group would like to do, then we can possibly look at a consulting group that can help us draft another one of these. It's not something I need to be trying to do. This is a relatively expert field. And there will be companies out there that do it. This zoning ordinance has sections. The first one is general requirements, where it just gives basically some general requirements of buildings and such as that. Lot sizes, just things that apply overall throughout the city. Then you got special use provisions, which is the first one is non-conforming uses and structures, which is the grandfather clause. Then you got group homes and manufactured homes. Group homes are allowed in multi-residential areas, and we've only got one in town that I know of. And of course, we've got manufactured homes, you got home occupations and cottage industries, which we've actually dealt with that a little bit recently. Off-street parking requirements. See, that's one problem. See, like when the junction was done, when it was originally allowed to be developed, especially the small building over where Subway is, there was not really adequate parking there. And then there was an ice machine put in the parking lot. did away with about 6 or 8 of the parking spaces. So, and that's why it ended up being moved across the street, and now it's at Welch's. But the reason for that was because it took away the parking there, as well as had some issues. The ice machines also violate the sign ordinance, the sign portion of this. Accessory residential units is, these are arcane stuff. Accessory residential unit is a relatively arcane thing. Most of the home occupation cottage industries are just people working out of their homes. A lot of people work out of their homes now. Now that everything's computerized, it's really not the big deal as it used to be. There's no traffic. You know, everything goes in and out by email and electronically. It's not that big a deal. And then you got the sign regulations. We've got about 15 pages of sign regulations that no one follows. Every sign is supposed to have a permit. Nobody sees to that. There are not supposed to be any signs in the right-of-way. And we have right-of-ways are full of signs. We don't have an enforcement officer to enforce that. And when you go through this ordinance, there's not a good enforcement mechanism to really deal with it anyway. Out here at this service station, you remember they used to have the fiberglass pole signs? Y'all remember those? And you remember how they got worn out? And you remember how they turned into some tatters? And then there just was a pole standing there? I mean, it never should have been there long. It never should have been there to start with, much less allowed to degrade that way. But we didn't have any way to truly enforce it. So, and those kind of things make your city look run down. You know, if you've got old pavement, and then you got worn out signs, and then you've got signs that aren't where they're supposed to be, and you've got cardboard tacked to posts, it's just not going to look like this is a place where anybody cares what it looks like. And that gives an overall impression of industry, of new residents. When people come in, when they see those kind of things, they don't want to come to a place like that. Those kind of things need to be cleaned up. So that's part of what this is for, but because the enforcement mechanisms, in my opinion, are so bad, it's so difficult to deal with. And some of those things can be dealt with a little differently, but that's something that this committee needs to talk about. Got a big section on cell towers. The cell towers are already here. There's probably going to be more coming because of 5G. 5G requires a radio receiver every 200 or 300 yards, I believe it is. It's like they have collector repeaters that send it up to the big tall towers. That's what makes 5G work, is a bunch of smaller. It's like networking your town in a more local sense than the bigger towers do. They work together. So that's actually something that needs to be upgraded to reflect the changes in the industry. Open space requirements, that's always important. You don't want, you see the developments like Tiger Town and such as that, you notice that they've got certain trees, and it's got these islands that have green space in them, or mulch, or in trees. Those are important to keep things from looking like a big flat concrete parking lot, which are just not as attractive when you drive by them as parking lots with green space in them. That's very important. And then we get to the zoning districts. And that's why I put the map in front of you, because that's where I really want to spend most of my time talking about. To me, this is an introductory course, okay?
Yes,
and I was wanting to give you an overview of what it looks like, and now we can go through this map, and I can really point out to you how it actually applies when you are trying to deal with this ordinance. Let's go back, like I said, to the triangle up where Dollar General is, up there from 431 and 77. You can look, there are 1, 2, 3 zoning districts within that area, 4, excuse me. We have, one of them is zone B1, which is what used to be G. McLean's store and that shop that was there. And that is zoned a neighborhood business district. Remember when we went through neighborhood business district, I don't remember if it was this one or the other one, but where they wanted to put a liquor store west side. That was the neighborhood business district we were talking about. Well, that's not a neighborhood business district anymore. If you'll notice, the Dollar General, which is next door, is zoned general business, B3. Now, why is that? I don't know. If you'll notice right across the street, Welch's Flower Shop, which was in operation up until this year, is now an antique shop and an ice sales place, is not zoned business at all. It's still zoned residential. And it's been a business as long as this map, I don't know, that business has been there as long as I can remember. And then you have M1 for some reason up there. The M1 was put there because the railroad was still there when this map was developed. And I'm pretty sure it was gone by the time this map was adopted, but this map still acts like there's a railroad running through the middle of town. And there is no railroad through the middle of town, and there will never be another railroad through the middle of town in our lifetimes. It's just not going to happen. Railroads are too expensive. They're not building new ones. And until you've got a whole lot of something to move, they're not going to build a railroad to you. You're going to build by the railroad. So we can just pretty much rule that out. And that's actually where the arena is. The new show barn. There's a cafeteria up there. But then you'll look and see the county engineer's office is on down 431 a little bit, and the county maintenance shop is located in R2. Now, those were there when this map was drawn. Why in the world is that a residential neighborhood? Single-family residences, that's what R2 is for. And then you have what used to be DHR, TB Hospital, which is now Hosanna Home, which is essentially a type of group home, I would think would be the best way to put it. Is also in R2, when at a minimum it should be an R3 or a commercial use, or a group home exception. Also in that is Lafayette Heights Baptist Church, its recreational center, and the raw land it has between it and the arena. Obviously, none of that is R2, and none of that will be R2, and none of that should be R2. That is that was just a large oversight. Another large oversight, if you look over to the left on 77, you see the little B1 triangle, which is neighborhood business, which is that old gas station where Jimmy Walker used to have his hamburger place. The next door to it is a shop, and I'm not so sure that shop is in that business zone. Because it should be a little bigger than this triangle shows. It may be in there, but I wouldn't swear to it. But if you look across the street, where the Mexican restaurant is, that's still in R2. And it's been that way since, I don't know, before 2000. Jimmy Walker had a restaurant in there when I moved back here in '93. I'm pretty sure. So again, it's just another large oversight. And then if you'll come back down a little bit, you see a V3 at an empty lot where it still shows a road that's been closed since I was about 10. It's right there next to the Tallies house, between the Tallies, and there's a new house built there on 77. I don't know who lives in it. And there's a house actually on that lot. The house you see on there, I think, is the old house that fell in on top of the hill. There's a new house now built in there. So you have a road that actually goes all the way around. Now, just to point out to you, also, I left something out on 431. Those, whatever you call those things John Carl rents, those block buildings, they're not supposed to be in R2. I think some of them are duplexes, but they're way too close together to be considered single-family residences, and that's not what it is. It's essentially a standalone apartment complex is what it is. There's also another one across the road toward 431 that is actually in an M1 district. M1 districts don't allow residential, in the way they're drafted now, they don't allow residences there. So that's just that triangle. I think I covered everything I wrote down. Oh, and the houses that are in the M1 district, right there on 431, where Dollar General is, right past Dollar General, there were 3 old houses there, or 2 old houses there. Only one of them's left, and it's been a car wash, if anything. I don't remember. those are businesses, those aren't residences, but it's an M1 district anyway. One gripe I want to bring up about the M1 district is the M1 district is light manufacturing district. It doesn't allow commercial inside the light manufacturing. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the M zone is no lesser. And in some of the B zones, you're not allowed residences. I really think some of our zones need to be better defined. They're not defined the best way, I don't think. One of the things I want to make sure I point out is, again, down the old railroad track, you have M1 and M2 consistently through there. The M1 comes down to where the old Avondale Mill was by the ballpark. There is nothing there anymore. The pulpwood yard is gone. Avondale Mill is gone. There's a building there on that concrete slab. That guy's in the junk business, so he's not technically supposed to be there and run a junk business. I don't think he's actually piled it up with junk. Have you been over there lately to look, George? All he did was put that building up. I've never ever really seen anything else happen there, have you?
No activity there.
He bought that lot just because it had that giant concrete slab on it. He could put a building on it, cheap. And I'm not, have you talked to him? Is he still living? He's in bad health.
Bad health last time, we had conversation.
But anyway, that doesn't make sense for that to be M1. And then you come down here and see M2. And M2 is there because there used to be a veneer mill in that big square, in that dark green. Y'all remember Belcher had a veneer mill there? I forget, it was actually a big lumber company built that mill. But it's been gone forever. And the pulpwood yard, Langley's pulpwood yard, was headquartered across the road. It's not shown on here the way it should be, but the pulpwood yard was actually on here too. Both of those are gone. I don't think Chris uses that property for anything as far as the pulpwood, Chris Langley, as far as the pulpwood yard is concerned. And as far as I know, the veneer mill has just been growing up. The only industrial uses in that dark green and that light green that were referred to is that one industrial building, and Chuck has a warehouse that he has to go down the railroad track to get to that's behind Trailer Mobile Home Park. That's not Trailers, what is it? What's the name of the mobile home park? Rose Mobile Home Park. So that's, I don't know why you would continue with an M1 district there. If you'll notice, Rose Trailer Park there is purple. If you look a little bit to the left, you'll see another trailer park that's yellow. There's not supposed to be a trailer park in the yellow. So again, you've got uses that were allowed. I think that trailer park was actually built after this map was done, but it's never been enforced. Thankfully, the latest owner of that trailer park has cleaned it up a lot. Last couple of times I've been by there, that whole area is much improved because he's done a good job of managing that trailer park.
Which one you talking about?
Thomas Place.
No.
It's still in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, some of those trailers over there, we get a lot of complaints. That's in my district. And a lot of those trailers, some of them, take a ride through there and see, some of them shouldn't even, I don't know.
Well, the trailers themselves are in bad shape, but
Yeah, and then a lot of the complaints and stuff we get from over there, but
we ain't had any shootings over there.
I think, yeah. Well, no, but it's pretty bad over there right now.
Okay. Well, and if you'll notice on the other side of the street, Mr. Charlie Vines' bootlegging shop has always been residential. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mention that. Some of us used to take a dune buggy across through the M1 down through the yellow to get to the bootlegger's house. And stay off the roads because we weren't old enough.
That was back in the younger days.
Yeah, I was much younger. I didn't have a driver's license. But anyway, the interesting thing, you'll see the R3 over there. That's actually a cemetery. I think that's really neat that they put all the cemeteries in R3s. multifamily dwellings. It just makes sense. Anyway, you'll see the Jenkins, and you see Green Home Apartments there in the orange. I'm still coming south, coming down from on the railroad in the dark green. And you'll see that you've got the dark green on the west side of the railroad, your left, and there's nothing there but museum. There's never going to be any industry there because the county owns it now. And then the pink there, your historical or your downtown business district. You've got the jail there, and the only other quote manufacturing concern you would have is what used to be Alex's Inc., which is an old cotton warehouse. I don't know that needs to be in the downtown business district because of the type of building that is. The jail, I don't think it much matters. The jail is what it is. It's a public building. You can put it in most places. Then you come on down the railroad track and you see this. What they looks like they did is it looks like they came in about 600, about 1,000 feet from the railroad track and just made an M1 district all the way 1,000 feet deep down the railroad track all the way to Handy Cemetery. And on the west side of the railroad track, there's only one industry, and there's never going to be another one because I know the guy that owns the rest of that land, and he ain't selling it to nobody to the business there. But you got Chris Langley still has his office there.
Who own that land there?
I do.
What about? Which one we talking about? Down in the M1? You can let us put a bid on
No, not unless they want to give me $1 million. I'll sell everything to them. I'll sell the bank industry, so you'll have a neighbor across the street that you won't like. Anyway, also, we have expanded Handy Cemetery. We haven't rezoned it to be what we're going to use it for. It needs to be R3 when it gets developed. Then on the other side of the railroad track, the old Southern Cotton Oil Mill, which was probably Hill Wholesale Lumber, and Shaw Brothers, most people probably remember as Shaw Brothers, that was the latest thing. An industrial concern has purchased that. It's in the name of a farm. Rick Sims bought it. I don't know what he's going to do with it. Do you know, Jordan?
I think storage warehouse, basically.
Okay.
They doing it.
And then Chuck has a warehouse over there. It's located against the railroad track. So there's not really any M1 there. The only saving grace of that M1 is that it looks like it gets Lyle's Body Shop, that would be important.
It did.
So anyway, there is some reason for there to be some M or some commercial classification, warehousing, light manufacturing. That is a historical use of that. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to revisit at about this point. I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back and make a general statement. If you follow B Street and you continue down B Street and then you come back over on 2nd Street Northwest, which is the one that goes by Avondale, I don't know that that's a street we want heavy trucks on anymore. When there were businesses located there, it was a lot different as far as the access and the number of trucks that accessed any business. I mean, there was a lumber yard back there, but I'm not real sure how in the world they managed to get loads of logs in there on a regular basis without messing some stuff up. The pulpwood yard there, the pulpwood came in on short trucks. I can understand that. And I'm assuming logs must all came in on short trucks. Because the veneer mill would have peeler logs, they'd all been 12 feet long, so it all probably came in on short trucks. They didn't come in on tractor trailers. Most of your textiles and your pulpwood going out left on the railroad. So the road was not the issue then as much as it would be now, because all traffic is gonna be semis. Can you see a semi trying to turn on, in this day of GPS, trying to turn onto whatever that is, 2nd Avenue Northwest, trying to make that turn to get on there to go down to Avondale Mill? Because the GPS is going to tell them to turn right there, and that road is not wide enough. You got that little hill there. Same thing with them coming out. I mean, they just would not work well. Back when they were bringing logs in here, those guys didn't follow GPS. They went the route that they were shown to come in, and they probably would never have gotten on 431 to have to try and turn off of it. It's not a good turn off at 431 up at the arena either, if you want to come in from that side. That street doesn't support the kind of traffic that manufacturing requires now. And so that whole area just needs to be completely rethought as far as what kind of usage it needs to be. With that said, let me come on down. We are generally, when we come down, all those houses along B Street are in M1. I don't think they're going to change. I think they're going to stay residential. I don't think businesses are going to be building there. Again, the road access is a large issue there. It's generally pretty good till you get to the old railroad track, and then just with that twist turn right there. That is a relatively wide road. Where it goes into 431 is not a place you want to encourage traffic to come out. I travel that pretty regularly. It's dangerous down at the bottom of that hill across from State Farm.
Yeah.
We got B3 there with DHR and the nursing home. We got M1 where Alex Lee had the old Russell plant, which was previously in Avondale and Playtex. Then we have the shopping center, Lowe's, and the other nursing home there is B3. I think all the business structures are in the B3 there at the junction. You know, you might want to think about that little brick house next to that area. You might want to think it might make sense to extend the commercial area over to where B Street comes out on Highway 50 and make a little more area for commercial businesses there. Because right now it stops at Teal, but you've got a large 10-acre lot right there next to it that has a single house on it that's pretty run down right now. The tenants there are really junky. They live a lot of stuff.
Which one is it?
It's a, see how you come down 50 right here, there's that one house sitting there on that large lot, but I guess it's in one of this commercial and all this other stuff. And this is residential. But it would make sense to extend that commercial over a little bit, to me. Now, this is up to y'all, but that's just a suggestion. There might be another place you put a little more R3 as well. There could be a couple of different uses there. From a lot of the overview you hear about is that there's a housing shortage. Housing shortages are not necessarily solved with low-cost, independently standing houses. A lot of times it needs to be filled stopgap measures with apartments and such as that. We have 2 effective apartment complexes that are not run by the Lafayette Housing Authority, Auburn Housing Authority. Lafayette Housing Authority doesn't do anything. So we've only got 2 privately owned multi-residential areas in town that I can think of. It's the Ranch Apartments, which right now are still holding up, and then Indianwood. You might ordinarily you see commercial, high-density residential, and then it starts. As you move further out, you get into bigger lots and bigger, more individual housing. So that gets us to 431 Highway 50. As you can see, the dark green, that is the industrial park. A lot of that is the industrial park, the solar plant, and the current industrial stuff. Technically, the Family Dollar there is not a proper use, and it was built after this map was done. And that's another reason I don't know why you couldn't mix commercial and heavy manufacturing. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would exclude those. And I definitely would put commercial in with light manufacturing. Got Albans, B2, and we got where James Vines has bought what used to be the Ranch Restaurant, if anybody's old enough to remember that. There was actually a restaurant next to the Ranch Motel or the Ranch Apartments, and that building fell in at least 40 years ago. It fell in when I was a teenager, and that lot's been empty now. I think James Vines, Jimmy has cleaned it off. And his brother, I think, is gonna put a welding shop there, or that's the plan. Also, what used to be the feed store there, the small engine place, that fella, he is actually a light manufacturer as well. He might be considered heavy manufacturing. He does maintenance work on industrial HVAC. So there is some fabrication of duct work that takes place in his facility. It's not very big, it doesn't have to be, but there is some fabrication that happens there. It may or may not be done correctly. But that's the kind of business that you want. I mean, you want businesses there, and he does a good job. He's cleaned that building up. That it looks a lot nicer if you bothered to notice recently. He's done a good job cleaning it up and making that building look nice. So that's town through the north and south.
What about, we were talking about cleaning up, right there, what's the, on 431 on your left right there, the little, going up to the lumber yard, on the corner right there, what's his name?
Oh gosh, the little house right there, the little house is.
No, the business, Mr.
Talking about Alex Lee?
No, on 431 south, past Dollar General, turn up, go to the lumber yard.
Oh, little building there, place.
What's that does the tires and all that, the trucks and all that? What's the name?
Oh, Wayne Good.
What area is that? 'Cause that need cleaned up out there too.
Well, that's out of the city limits, according to them.
No. City Living goes right there just across from the, just past ABC store.
Well, no, there it is on the corner.
It could be in M2.
It's in M2. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can say about it.
You got him, and you got another little building on the other side of the drive.
Yeah, the building on the other side of the house drive is actually a house. There was a house, you got Alex had the old McLennan terminal, then you got that little house that's just stuck there, then you got the two old service stations, and the guy started, acting like he was gonna start a car wash.
I'm talking with all the old junk tires and all that stuff out
Then
there.
you got the old service station not doing anything, then you got Gooden's, which is on the other side of the road, which is that's a heavy industrial area, so there's not really anything we can say about that. There's also, on that same lot, is that fuel station, which is a co-op for the truckers, which keeps the truckers that are located out in the county, they actually have that, they own that fuel station in a co-op arrangement, so that they actually come here and fuel their trucks. So that's a good business we want, but it's technically not heavy manufacturing, but that's what
So
it's
what
on.
so who approved them to go there?
Nobody was paying attention when they moved there. That was
Well, how long has it
15 years
been?
ago.
Remember how long it's been there?
About 15 years ago.
That's before I got here.
It was before I was city attorney, I'm pretty sure.
And inspector too.
I don't know how long, every time I turn around, I thought that was just like 2 or 3 years ago, but I've been told it's a lot
It's been a
longer.
long time.
But there on 431, you know, you can do some things with your zoning ordinance to require those businesses to make a better preservation there. Now, how much ex post facto you can do that, I don't know, but Wayne Gooden is getting older, and nobody's gonna pick up that business and run with it, I don't think. If they are, they're not gonna operate out of that building. So if you're ready and your zoning has changed or the new requirements in there, as soon as he quits using it for that business, then that can't go back in.
Grandfather stuff is gone.
Yep. That's why this is planning. Can't necessarily fix everything, but you can plan so that it doesn't happen again in the future. Just some odd things I want to point out. Of course, you got State Farm, the car wash, that was put there whenever the crispy chick came in. None of y'all old enough to remember that. It was Churches after that. We've got a business district next to Eastside Elementary, next to the baseball field, the Board of Education baseball field. That's an old service station and Edge's Gas, which, you know, that's kind of a commercial area there, because you got the cemetery right there. It's a good place. You got the school right there. That's a good place for you to have commercial things. You would have thought that the city electrical department would have been zoned business as well, but it's not. It's zoned R2. All the schools are in R2, which they're allowed in R2, but it doesn't make much sense. It makes more sense to me, the schools ought to be in a commercial zone, because oftentimes, wherever you have a congregation of people, you'll want to have retailers, convenience stores, and things like that. And if you look at the high school, you got a lot of kids coming there every day. You got a lot of teachers coming there every day. You've got the ball field two ball fields right down the way. You know, that might be an area that you want to zone some of that commercial, so that if somebody wants to put a convenience store in the area of the school or the ball field, they can. You got churches there. It's essentially being used that way anyway. And we have a general business district that's obsolete and really messed up right over here, right over the hill. I don't know if y'all remember Adams Service Station. It's still there. It's got a little flea market there, but that commercial use runs all the way down to what used to be Doc Tucker or Allen's Flower. There are two Allen's Flower Shop. That was one of them. I think her name was Doc Tucker. And she had a flower shop in her basement, so they zoned her house commercial. That doesn't make any sense. And of course, I would think that you'd want to try and get, Adams Service Station is never going to be a viable commercial enterprise with the building that it is in the area that it is.
So you recommend us changing that to what?
I would recommend changing that to, I want to talk about a little bit on how our districts are. R2, because it is a residential area right there, or an R1. Also, right here across the way, that service station right there is the only thing that's commercial right here. And then cleared out that great big area right there for it to be commercial. And if you look across the way at James Walker's, no, it's not James Walker's, that's the old King Power Building. The old King Power Building is zoned R1. And now it's just been sold to operate basically a lottery. Put his mechanic shop and his store and run his business out of it. He probably hadn't had to apply for a license yet,
What you know?
because he just put it there recently. But that needs to be rezoned sooner rather than later. I don't see any reason why that whole area, that whole triangle section line comes down, ought to be zoned some sort of business. We got a B1 and a B3. It needs to be B3. B3 is general business, right? It needs to be B3, I think.
Or at the triangle, I mean.
Yeah, right here.
At the split.
This whole triangle, including across the bypass. I would think it would be B3. And that that leads me to our R districts. Essentially, everything else in the city is zoned an R2 or an R1. R2 is single-family dwellings. Single-family dwellings, that's all fine and dandy, but if you'll notice, there are vast spaces that are zoned R2 and R1 that are not single-family dwelling areas. They're undeveloped property. A lot of it's being used. A lot of it's being used for ranch. Robert Lee runs cattle on a lot of it. My neighbor runs horses on it. We have other people that run horses. That has been a problem in the past and has caused problems with occasional neighbors complaining on an unusually hot summer when there's a fly problem or something like that. We've also run into problems. If you read our weed and grass ordinance, technically every undeveloped lot is a violation of the weed and grass ordinance. I think the recommendation, if there's any changes made to our residential classification, that there also be a change made to ordinances for the weed and grass. If a property's never been developed, that it's not subject to the weed and grass ordinance. It just doesn't make any sense. And we've got some lots that border undeveloped land where the houses have fallen in and they're required to mow the lots, but the property next door is not. One place I can think of is across the street from West Side. You got that lot there in the corner that's allowed, that has to be mowed, but the area between it and the brick house on down the road doesn't have to be mowed because it's undeveloped property. But how do you know, that doesn't make sense. The statute, our ordinance says the same thing. Both of them are subject to the same ordinance. But you don't require them on properties that haven't been developed because it just doesn't make any sense. Again, there's a fellow that owns a bunch of woodlands down Hospital Street that would object to having to mow the grass on all 130 acres that are covered with pine and oak trees. That would be difficult to do. But there needs to be some adjustment in that. Our districts, especially the open areas, I think it's important that the Planning Commission give a lot of thought into how you deal with forest lands, how you deal with undeveloped land, how you deal with the small farms. A lot of the people that want to come to a place like Lafayette would rather be in Auburn or Opelika, but they come to Lafayette so they can have 2 or 3 acres and they can have an animal or two, or they can have a little elbow room and spread out. And we want to encourage those kind of people to come in. They come in, they spend a lot of money. They spend it in our feed stores. They spend it in our dollar stores. But the feed store is basically our only viable retail business that's locally owned. Now, if you come back and think about it, now some of the gas stations are. They tend to change hands a little more frequently. But the Piggly Wiggly is now owned by someone from Wadley. And their partners are in New York. Then if you look at Renfro's, it's owned by someone that's Montgomery-based now. So if you're looking at your retail businesses that churn out sales tax, we've only really got one that is run by a local person that's not a gas station or a food store. The dollar stores are chains. I think it's important that we encourage those kind of businesses because that's what keeps small towns together. So I think it's important that this group consider the future development on how it handles residential development such that if someone wants to have animals on a lot larger than 3 acres, then that ought to be something that's written into this ordinance so that it's not an issue. You don't want people putting horses and cattle on small lots. I mean, that doesn't work. But when you've got large areas that people want, that you can control animal density too. Say if you control it to 1 or 2 horses per acre or something like that on a minimum 3 acre lot, then you've got the ability to regulate it to some extent so that you don't have an overcrowding, you don't have a fly problem, you don't have a manure problem, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because in my district out there on Second Avenue Southwest, out of Abilene out there. You know, I get a lot of complaints during the summer where they're spraying that chicken manure stuff, and, you know, and you got farm right there next to residential, and, you know, people can't breathe, and so
Yeah, I know Daddy did it the other day.
that's a big problem. So something we need to look at, you know, that stuff, you know, everybody can't. So we need to definitely look at our ordinance, I mean, the zoning and stuff like that. I mean, you know, they got a business and all that, but still, they gotta take into consideration other people too that live next to these properties.
And that, you know, because a lot of that property is grandfathered in, because it was pasture when this was passed, so
Yeah.
it's there. But that's a nuisance ordinance. It can be in a zoning ordinance, or it could be something this planning commission recommends to the council to adopt. There's still a couple of errors on this zoning map. There's a couple of things left out. The city council recently, on recommendation of the planning commission, granted neighborhood business status to, I forget what the lady's name is, but,
Rico Williams,
yeah, Rico Williams.
431.
Yeah, on 431. You know, that whole side of 431 may need to consider all the way from the flower shop. I mean, that's that whole side, with the exception of where that group of houses is before you get to Leah's shop. You might want to consider making that all a neighborhood business, not general, but neighborhood, so that you don't have the high volume traffic on that side of the road like you do on the other side of the road. The folks within the triangle, the traffic can be handled a lot better than it can be on that side of the road. I have spewed out a lot of information. Right now, we don't have anywhere we can put many warehouses. There's some out at the junction, but we don't have anywhere to put many warehouses. The fellow cleared a lot in the bypass, wanted to put many more warehouses, and George looked at it, we don't have any place that allows many warehouses.
That would fall under which one?
I don't know, we don't have
We'll
any.
have a couple,
And, you know, that's a commercial, and it's a needed service, and it's a commercial service. You know, people can store their goods, they don't have to travel somewhere else to do it. It can be a boom or bust business, I'm not gonna opine on that, but.
because that wouldn't fall under none of these categories we already got.
Yeah, our categories are so ill-defined that there are certain specific industries that appear to be not included in the descriptions of what's allowed to happen in our zone. Similar to the issues we got with residential, your M1 and your M2s spend too much time talking about tire recapping than they do about what they need to address.
So we need to address that, change it,
Yeah,
look
all
at
those-
changes. But I'd like to see hotels here in Lafayette.
That'd be nice.
What zone, I mean, what would that fall under?
I don't even know that we have classifications listed.
So we need to, I'm saying we need to update.
Because,
So
I
we
mean,
can include these new things and new ideas and new businesses and stuff like this stuff going back to the 80s, and we need to come up with new zones or whatever well, businesses that will fall into these categories we got here. So we need to change where they're worded, I guess.
yeah, we need to be a little more inclusive, we need to be a little more, they need to be a little broader in some ways, more specific in others.
And we can do that too by looking at some of the other cities that how they're zoned and for those different type of businesses, we're looking at trying to attract and stuff too, so.
Yes, and that was my ending topic, was that all these classifications need to be looked at, need to be reviewed, need to be modernized. I wanted to spend the most time on the map because the map is what's most out of whack. And of course, if we change the districts, if we have an additional business district, or we have, you know, like an M1, 2, and 3, heavy manufacturing, light manufacturing, and you know, a different classification, warehousing maybe. Because I just don't think I just don't think that the way things are written now, it's hard for George to sort out whether something's allowed in that district. We need a better draft of that. And, you know, looking at other cities would be a start, but find out what consultants helped them with it would be even a bigger start. And then hiring them, but that takes city council money, and city council will work for it second. But if this planning commission lays some groundwork and figures out what it would like to do, it makes it a lot easier to hire the consultant. You don't wanna hire the consultant and say, I don't know what to do. Because then you just spend a whole bunch of money. They come at you with a plan and you go, I don't want that there. Nobody would want that there. That's so-and-so's backyard, you know. There are things that this committee knows and no consultant's gonna know. If we can come in and say, we really would like this to be residential, we want to make sure that you can do this within this kind of residential. We don't want to be able to do this in this kind. We want business here instead of there. And then they will come in and shape things for you and give you recommendations. But you've got to know what you want before you hire, or you got to know where to start before you hire. Or otherwise, they're going to spend a whole bunch, $10,000 just coming up with a proposal that you're going to outright reject. It may look like this. I wasn't expecting y'all to really make any decisions. This was, to me, just an informative introduction session. I do think it would be good if we had an opportunity to discuss the classifications at another time, maybe a month or so after everybody's had a chance to at least briefly review what's in the book. I'm not talking about studying it, but at least familiarize yourself with it. Because when I start talking about variances and rezonings and different things like that, it gets real confusing real quick if you're not familiar with the terms.
And I think a good way too is to take this thing, if you get a chance to, while you're out riding around the city, take this thing out and look at
Where you at?
ride out and see what's in these communities, or these neighborhoods, or these areas on this map, and you'll get a better understanding. And you look at it and somebody will come and want to put this over there, and you're like, whoa, are you familiar with that area? You know, that will help you too, by, getting to know the city and see what's already out there.
It's sort of like, why is Monroe McCoy's old barbecue house and Broom's old convenience store in central business district? You look at it right here, sitting there, that's pink. Why is that pink? And of course, we're not going to talk about what Broom's convenience store is right now because it wouldn't qualify under anything.
Apartment, huh?
Kind of a boarding house, actually. Anyway, we won't talk about fire marshals and all that kind of stuff for that place. But then you got across the street, I don't know, they still run daycare over there? What's going on?
No.
Too, would help if some of these people that own some of this land around here, turn some of this land loose, and we could do some things too.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
what you want?
he has a lot of land, doesn't he?
That's right. That's why I said that. I've been busy accumulating. I spent all my money accumulating.
We just look at expanding, they ain't gonna sell, get rid of this land around here, look at expanding. One thing I thought about, the city limits,
You don't have to.
move the city limits out, and forget the police jurisdiction, like a lot of cities have done. They've done away with police jurisdiction and extended the city limits. For
Well,
example,
And they
Auburn
just
goes
changed,
all the way to the county line now.
they just changed all the rules on that too.
Yeah.
It came out in August,
Yeah.
effective in August. I've got to review that for some other things the council wants me to look at, but possible.
But that'll start when in 23, maybe?
Yeah, and, the thing about expanding city limits is that can be a very contentious process. If you expand south, which is what we would like to do, you're gonna take in more of the solar plants, you're gonna take in TREC, you're gonna take in Chambers Academy. TREC and Chambers Academy are gonna be tax exempt, so I don't know that it's gonna help a whole lot.
I'm looking at the land for future, other businesses or residential, something down in either direction. Even out here, the bypass, 431 north,
City limits helps to some extent.
Well, you don't have enough land in the city limits to have a large manufacturing. Like I said,
gotta go way south.
It's landlocked right now,
Leonard Riley has bought property like crazy for the city, and they're building like crazy.
Well, yeah, and you also have to remember that Valley's got the interstate right there, and that makes a large difference. And, yeah, and he bought, there's a lot of old West Point Stevens property is formerly industrial property. And a lot of people wouldn't take the chance on that property because of the EPA violation problems that it once had. But at this point, they've got most of that cleared up. They've sold the lots on the interstate, but they haven't sold anything else. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with the rest of it.
The two I look at every day, all this traffic that comes through the Fed, man, I mean, 431, 50, I mean, we get a lot of folks coming through here, and
We find a
other
way to
cities
get
have
it
taken advantage of 431 running through their cities, and they're doing very well. They've expanded, they've built, got new industry, new stuff coming, or whatever, so.
People said, traffic, just like you said, we don't have Interstate 85 coming through. Go to Roanoke, go to the industrial park up there and see what's all in there. There's 2 new buildings up there right now. I was up there last week at a company. They manufacture stainless steel for Hardee's, the Subways, all this and that. One guy in there, and the rest of them is out on the road installing it. They have to do it on the weekends. You can't do it. It can happen here too.
Yep. You gotta find a way to attract those businesses. If we want to do an industrial park, we're out of land, most of that went to the solar plant.
You need to come down to the IDA meetings and just say this, I've been saying down there, we need something in Lafayette. But everything that comes in down there, they look at Lafayette, no, we don't want that. We're going somewhere else.
We do have a couple of M2s available on the bypass. There's about 65, 70 acres on the north side of the bypass that's in this dark green that is just not been, I don't think that's exactly the way that reads. I don't think that's right. But anyway, there's a lot of acreage there that the Tolberts still own that they're willing to sell. Of course, Ms. Nell and Jeff are always willing to sell for industrial purposes. So we do have some land there, but it has not moved.
But you got wetland there too.
Yeah, yeah, that thin piece right there is, I'm looking at more at the northeast side of the intersection of the Casino Road and the bypass. There's a big chunk there, and it's somewhat steep, but there's a big chunk of land right there. But all the rest of it on the other side of the road is solar plant. George, did you have anything you want to add?
I just want to reiterate on, since you did a great review on it, now it's a good explanation of why some businesses, when they come, I have difficulty making it match up with this book, because, this book is what we normally go by. Max is using, if it's not in the permitted uses, we use it before board, trying to figure out what to do, proper way to do it. Over the years, we've had board adjustment meeting for mobile homes in M1, mobile home for just about in M2, mobile homes in M1, and it's already existing houses there. So this kind of puts you to where if you look at the permitted use, it'll say mobile home ain't allowed in M1, but you look down through there, you got several houses, so you kind of like can't let nobody put a mobile home or something there. As long as the Board of Adjustments approve it, it goes in there. Most spaces are like centralized business downtown. The historic district conflicts it. So when somebody comes downtown and want to do a business, they'll say, well, you give them a hard time, but if you got to follow these guidelines, life safety and all that, when it connects with all these buildings, it does seem like, because, a lot of the historic districts is not, open door ready. We run into it, it might be a restaurant on one side of town, or this or that. It's a whole lot, and me and him been talking about this map for a good while, and these are the two things that we kind of look at. Is it permitted in there, or is it not permitted? If it's not permitted, it got to go between them, got to go before a board. So that's what sometimes takes a long time. And sometimes the people trying to do a business is not familiar. You know, it's their first time starting up a business, so they don't know they have to run into all this, so they ready to turn the key in. You know, they run into these setbacks. But it's a lot more difficult than you think, because we have to deal with a lot of different boards. And then sometimes, for your question, Mike, sometimes they say, like Scott said, I think you missed it over here, Scott Towing, it's in a residential. He had some ideas, wanna do some things. So, and then there's some other property right in between here in the store, was up for marketing, but it's residential, and they wanna do some commercial work. So then, no rezoning. So the question to that mobile home, to the motel, a lot of time when people call and have a conversation with me, you know, before they purchase it, you know, I say, well, either the existing owner need to try to get it rezoned for this purpose, or I wouldn't buy it until you maybe get by the board. So those are some of the small things, sometimes hold up a lot of business sometimes. Not big business, but, you know, the smaller business trying to get up. The property is not set up for what they're trying to do it for. So then sometimes they'll just back out the deal or something like that. But it's very difficult. You get a lot of different things, like houses, businesses, and rezoning and all this kind of stuff. That's a whole lot.
Anybody have specific questions they'd like me to address before I sit down? All right, Ms. Angela, I'll turn it back over to you. And you can adjourn if you want to.
Well, before she adjourns, let me make a suggestion. Mike, you started off up here at Triangle, going through all of that, that's in block 11 and block 12. Why don't we concentrate on the 2 blocks and maybe come back the next time and say, this is what we need to change in these blocks and change these ordinances, instead of trying to go over the whole thing, narrow it down. And then after that, move on to another one.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think we really need an idea of what our classifications are before we do that.
Okay, I'll agree with that too.
So I think we need to do classifications next, so that when we go through and do that review, we can block it off. But we'll go, well, these classifications don't work, and it'll help us decide, well, we need to change this classification, maybe we need another one, maybe we need a different classification that's broader and more narrow or something like that.
Okay, one more question, right quick. On here you got R1 and R2. R1 is a low density and R2 is a medium. What's the difference between those two?
The R1s are set up, like I was talking about, 3 acres, 1 or 2 stock animals are allowed, those kind of things. You can have a higher density, but you can have the bigger lots that are a little more, with a little more freedom to do different things on the lot.
Well, instead of having like R1 and R2, just have it R1 and have it specified residential only. If you have 3 or 4 more acres in residential, then you can have an animal instead of having 2.
Well, yeah, I think it might be easier to really gauge all that on lot size. It's less about
Lot size.
the zone itself, more on lot size. Now, you do have some areas that are already subdivided. The question is, does somebody want to put all those lots together and make them a little bigger lot? We really need to look at a lot of that, like in the area where you've got these dilapidated houses, the only way that's ever going to be developed is where you give a little more freedom. Well, a lot of those lots are too small to be developed under this. So that needs to be looked at on how we need to adjust that. There are some different things the city can do. This commission can say the city needs to get more aggressive and do this with dilapidated housing. The city would like to do that, but the next step the city's never done. The city's had in mind to tearing down houses, but never have we filed a procurement lien, and never have we tried to enforce one and sell the lot to get our money back. Which I've drafted those forms through the years, I've submitted them, but it never has happened. So, I'm not trying to blame it on any one person, but I think there was some political will lost somewhere in transition. They wanted the houses torn down, nobody wanted to really push to get confrontational with taking the land away from the owner. All these people that the city cuts their grass for free for $120, there ain't no sense in that. Somebody else will charge $250 to do it or more.
So come cut mine, I'll let you cut it.
See, there you go. Well, you gotta let it grow up like this and get a letter from the city. Yeah, and that means you can only cut your grass twice during the summer.
That's
And the
all.
city will do it for you. Cheap. Right, George?
The thing I can do right now is ride that lawn.
Cut the grass.
All right, y'all. Ready to eat now?
That's good job. That's a good job.
We got a lot of work.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Tucker for giving us this class, and he'll get back in touch with you for the next meeting.
Yeah, and then we're gonna work on getting them some books.
Yeah, well, you said they were online. If we have some books, and somebody needs us to print a copy, you know, if we only always print a copy of that scan. It's not like we can't do that. But everybody needs to have a copy of that book.
Yeah, so they can go through it and.
Do we need to make?
I think council did one too. I think council did one too.
I've got to.
No, he said
You know that, you do have one here.
the next meeting will be about, classification. So, we really don't need to discuss it, we got to get through that first.
I don't know if we don't need to agree on that. It's up to you.
We're gonna follow his guideline, cause he know more about it than we do, so. We'll follow him. So if all parts line up, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night, folks.